So what we have here is failure to communicate. And I appreciate and want to say thank you to all of the people who have been tweeting and writing in and etc., saying that, well, Cornette and Last have been calling this for a couple or 3 years, and we're finally finding out that they were ahead of the game on this. But now here's the situation in AEW. Their biggest star is not only injured, but he's suspended. Their entire roster of EVPs, the ones that are remaining, Cody already hit the fucking back door, they're suspended. They have gotten a ridiculous amount of bad publicity. And more importantly, the fans are picking sides. So even if all of this is somehow miraculously smoothed over, the fans are already going to have a negative viewpoint of one side or the other in this thing. And in many cases, it's baby faces that they're going to be fucking mad at and have a negative opinion of. And the whole company looks like shit because of, shit trickles down like everything else. And from the top, that's what we've gotten. And it's not just the cosplay wrestling fans and the childish contingent of wannabe indie-rific wrestlers. It's also grown adult people that realize that this is not good for anybody. And so, yes, you have the California contingent trying to do everything they can behind people's backs and whisper campaigns to put heat on Punk and anybody that fucking sides with Punk. Because for all the reasons we've mentioned, not only are they upset about their positions, but they feel threatened because their friends have positions too that they don't deserve. But everybody's looked like shit in this because Tony wouldn't do anything from the start to prevent this from happening. And we mentioned, the fact that there's no way he's hearing any of this stuff for the first time when it comes out on the internet or on Twitter or in the reports or whatever, or in front of him at media scrums. He's heard it before. He hadn't been able to do anything. I got an email from an actual grown adult out there in the cult of Cornette who doesn't know any of these people personally, but he had a pretty good take on it. From Nick: Jim, your frequent comparisons to what would or wouldn't happen in mainstream pro sports contest are accurate, and how the CM Punk Elite conflict has been covered by wrestling quote-unquote journalists is another example. As someone who works in sports journalism, it has been galling to watch. From the journalists applauding wrestlers entering the press conference to the takes on the fight, any sports writer, whether they cover high schools or pros, would die to get the type of honesty Punk gave. Secondly, if it was so awful and so unprofessional, why didn't Tony Khan cut in to stop Punk or tell reporters to limit questions to the night's match? And as a journalist, I'd want to know why executives are scuffling with employees, and if they were, why they were still executives. When reading some of the stories, it's blatant that only one side talks to reporters and the stories are skewed in that direction. And let's face it, also, that's true as well, because the people taking up for Punk are taking up for Punk purely because they can see what's going on in front of them. There's been no whisper campaign with, oh, those guys. We can see it straight out, and everybody else can. But Punk's not feeding shit to the press. That's the other side's wheelhouse. So anyway, Nick continues, anyone thinking AEW would be better off with the Elite than Punk is out of their depth. Sports history has proven the all-pro quarterback, the leading scorer on a basketball team, or the guy who leads the league in home runs gets more leeway. He's the only mainstream star with ratings and merchandise sales to back it up. If Tony can't see that, it's just confirmation AEW isn't an organization to take seriously long term. So, That's an example from somebody has a journalistic background, but is seeing what's going on. Here's another thing. Dave Shearer at PW Insider wrote a column. This was from Thursday, I believe, September the 8th. That was Thursday, right? I encourage you, if you can, to find it. It's long and it's very perceptive, and I was going to read it, but now I realize it'd take me 30 minutes to read it, so I've got a couple of paragraphs. And the reason this caught my eye is because he started with a Mama Cornette quote. Only he attributed it to his old boss, Gary Snellbaker, where he used to work for him at the Coca-Cola Company.
Sounds fake. Sounds like a fake name.
Well, he said the same thing. Mama Cornette, whenever we'd have a family get-together, we're going to go out fishing or we're going to go to the store at holidays, Thanksgiving dinner, whatever. We're supposed to all do something as a group, but everybody's standing around waiting for somebody else to take the lead and nobody's doing anything. And that's when Mama Cornette would jump in and say, all right, let's do something, even if it's wrong. Meaning, let's do fucking something. And that's what he started the column with. But it was a quote from his old boss, Gary Snellbaker. Do something, even if it's wrong. Do something, Tony. Here's an excerpt. From the beginning, Tony has seemed to be more concerned with being a fan who was able to hang around with wrestlers and book a fantasy federation in real life, rather than a leader who would grow a company that could, maybe someday, compete with WWE. He had the money, but he didn't have the leadership skills, and with each passing day, the latter becomes more and more apparent. I remember back at Halloween of the first year, when he dressed up like Orange Cassidy and sent pictures of it out on social media. I called it a bad move that will send the wrong message to the talent. Some scoffed at me. Tony's just having fun, they said. He's one of us. Yes, that's the point. The owner of the company should never come off as a cosplaying mark, because most wrestlers are predatory animals, and once they see that kind of weakness, they take advantage and they realize they have freedom that they shouldn't possess.
That's absolutely true. Throughout the history of wrestling, that's true.
The vibe of AEW being Disney World for wrestlers had long since dissipated when Adam Page went on TV on the Go Home show before his title defense against CM Punk and double-crossed the challenger by going into business for himself with a bizarre promo that made no sense at all, especially for a babyface taking on another babyface. At that very point in time, Tony Khan was at a seminal moment in the history of the company. Page, who I was very happy to hear get some deserved boos last night, started AEW going down the toilet with his actions, and Khan exacerbated it by doing absolutely nothing about it. And then he mentioned, of course, Punk got hurt. So his anger at Page stewed while he waited for revenge. When he came back, he got his receipt on national TV by also going into business for himself. Khan could have done something then as well to diffuse the situation. But again, he played the fiddle while his Rome was burning. And also while Punk was out, someone leaked to some favorable reporters that Punk had gotten Colt Cabana fired. It was widely reported by outlets, even though there was no truth to it at all. What did Tony Khan do? Not a damn thing until the story had blown up and turned into a disaster. By the time he finally said, yeah, that isn't true, it was far too late and serious damage had been done, and it all falls on Khan's ineffective at best leadership. And then he mentioned you got CM Punk, a man with a history of not taking being disrespected, lying down. And there you go. This is a long and interesting and perceptive article on the situation, and that was just a part of it, so pwinsider.com. But again, that Dave Shearer has been a wrestling fan for 40 years, and now he owns the website, but he doesn't go to live matches and go to scrums and talk to the boys individually and become friends with them. He is running a business of a website, and he likes wrestling, but he doesn't immerse himself in being friends with anybody to take their side. He calls it like he sees it because he's removed. He's impartial. And yeah, a lot of people can say we ain't impartial. but we're also very perceptive. And we see what's going on and we know what's happening. And we have for a while. And the whole thing boils down to when you create Disney World for wrestlers, you not only let them do whatever the fuck they think they want to do, but you let them get the idea that they can do whatever they want to do. And sometimes that's not limited to creativity in a wrestling ring. Then they get the feeling, well, this place can't run without us. And then when Twinkle Toes comes back and every week his match loses 200-something thousand viewers, then they start getting nervous, and then they start trying to figure out some way that they can fuck with the people who are out drawing them. And then there you go. So, and here's another, we've overlooked this that was announced this past week, that the WWE has hired the guy that used to run the Oakland Raiders. So now they hired the biggest mover and shaker agent in Hollywood that's making them a bloody fucking fortune, Nick Khan, jolly old St. Nick. They hired the guy that used to run the Oakland Raiders talent to be in charge of talent relations, not booking, but relating with the talent, the contracts, and the big-time players. Tony Khan hired Matt Jackson's wife and grade school friends. Let that sink in for a minute. So then you've got this mess going on where one side's serious about the wrestling business and the other side's serious about their own business. And the show is schizophrenic. And all this is starting to come to a head. And Tony still can't get in and do anything about it. So now there's an independent third-party investigation. I'd like to know who the independent third party is. But what is there to investigate?
Is there only one investigation? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, but what is there to investigate? So this fucking guy, Adam Page, goes out and tries to bury the top star in the company on national television. And I guarantee you that any time in the history of this business, the Attitude Era, the territories, whatever, you got two guys doing promo for a world title match and one of them tries to bury the other one on live television and he don't know what's coming. I'm surprised you didn't see physical violence there. And it would have been entirely justified. Motherfucker ever went into business for me for himself on television and tried to bury me, he would have got a fucking racket. But so you've got a guy that does that to your biggest star and world champion. Then the guy gets a chance to sit home and stew about it for a while, comes back and gets his receipt in very effective fashion. And then to the rest of them that have been spreading the rumors that he's sick and fed up with, he tells them at the media scrum, if you got any problem with me, then come to my locker room. Thinking that the gutless pussies would never do it. But they did. They didn't, the EVPs, they didn't go, Tony Khan, boss of this organization, guy that was sitting right next to him when he said all those things, and you didn't say boo to a goose or try to argue with anything. So what are you going to do about it now? Because now we're pissed. No, they didn't do that. What they did was they go over to his locker room. A bunch of them. A lot of people have said 3, but a lot more people than that got suspended. Brandon Cutlet got suspended. Michael Naka to fuck off got suspended.
Kenny Omega's assistant. Let's just throw that in there.
Kenny Omega's assistant and the Young Bucks' grade school friend. Does anybody think that they were storming in that locker room to pull shit apart? So there's Punk. Now we know not only was he after the media scrum, he was still bleeding from the match. Now we know he was hurt with a torn tricep. At least it was, maybe it was torn after the match, or maybe it was torn in this skirmish. Who knows? But he's after a match. He's tired. He's hurt. He's bleeding. And now we also know from testimony and from things that have gotten out that he's in his locker room with his dog and Ace Steel's wife, who now apparently we come to find out is on crutches. She's got some kind of injury. Did she break her leg? I don't know what the fuck, but Punk is sitting in his locker room, beat up, banged up, and bleeding with a dog and a crippled woman, when anywhere from 3 to 6 grown men burst into the room however they say they want to do it. Somebody said, well, you can't kick those doors down. I don't think that anybody in the elite could kick a goddamn door down if it was a door that you could kick down. But they sure apparently opened it in a surprising manner. And these guys rush into this fucking room. What's he supposed to do? He's just told them if they had a problem to come to his locker room. Apparently they got a problem. They've come to the locker room. And there's 3 to 6 of them. And there's one of him, and he's got a dog and a crippled woman as a backup. Are you going to sit there and say, hey, guys, did you come here to talk to me while they pounce on you? Or are you going to take the one in the lead down, which I assume that's what jolly old Matt was, because he was the first one that was involved in this, apparently. And he got the shit beat out of him, and then there's still a bunch more, but they've made enough noise that Ace Steel, somewhere down the hall, sees that the room that his crippled wife is in and his best friend is in, somebody's just burst through the door and there's all kinds of shit going on. So he comes in. Go ahead.
And this is around the time we also know now from reporting Pat Buck at some point got in that room. And he's another, I don't know if he's a producer. I have the exact title somewhere, but not in front of me. But he's a backstage, I think, vice president, actually, of talent.
Well, he, after the big promotions of the few weeks ago, but Ace Steel comes in and he sees his best friend in a skirmish with 3 to 6 other people in the room where his wife is either still in or just trying to get out of. So he takes matters in his own hands, because I'd do the same thing. And the fucking elite gets a shit kicked out of him by a fucking guy that's bleeding with a torn tricep and a fucking retired producer. And that don't set well with him either.
Hey, let me ask you this.
And then, well, one more thing. And then when all this, when everybody realizes what's happened here, then all of a sudden, from the EVP side, it's, well, we just went to talk to him. You probably should have waited. If all you wanted to do was talk, you probably should have waited till everybody was a little calmer, and maybe till the guy had gotten out of the shower. But he didn't give the Bret Hart offer to Vince. Punk didn't. He didn't say, you know what, you guys just stay right here that have busted in my locker room. As soon as I get out of the shower, if you're still here, I'm going to knock you out. He just cut that part out and went straight to the knocking out. What is hard to understand about this? This has happened in wrestling a bunch of times. The only difference now is that some of the wrestlers are EVPs and they're whiny little bitches that when they get their shit handed to them, they try to backpedal and go, oh, God, we just wanted to talk to him and iron this all out. Then why'd you bring a bunch of guys in to bust into his fucking locker room to make it worse? Pea-brained imbeciles. What were you going to say?
Well, there were a few different points I was going to jump in, but, you know, again, when you try to look at this objectively, like you just said, in the room, CM Punk, Ace Steel's wife, I forget what her name is, apparently she was a wrestler at some point, with a broken leg, well, on crutches, one or the other. His dog, by the way, my reporting has Mega Parikh, who everyone always says is the number 2 in the company, who's in charge of legal in the company, who I think is in charge of HR in the company, who was down the hall with the Bucks before they came down. She somehow got the dog out of the room. Other people have said Omega had the dog when he got attacked or beat up by Ace Steel, who knows? But somehow the dog, what was the dog thinking when everyone storms in the room? That's what I want to know.
Well, I'm surprised somebody didn't get their ass bit. Besides, by the dog, by the dog.
An ass got bit, not...
And here, one more thing. Ace Steel bit Twinkle Toes. Has Ace Steel had blood work done?
Oh, come on.
It's a concern. Go ahead.
It would be a concern for anything. If anyone had a bite that was deep, if you get bit by a dog, you would want to get your blood tested, just to be clear on this. But again, just CM Punk the dog. Ace Steel's not in the room. I think a lot of people assume that early on because of his involvement here and his friendship with CM Punk. Ace Steel's not in the room. In the room, we have Kenny Omega. We have the Young Bucks. We have Nakazawa. We have Cutler. So that's 5 people. Apparently at the back of the line was Mega getting ready for the dog handoff, I guess. I don't know what the fuck that's about. And her involvement in this is something very interesting because if she has anything to do with that investigation and she's a party to that investigation and she was down the hall with the Young Bucks.
Wait a minute, she's the one that actually not only let the EVPs go to Punk's locker room, but followed them there? She's the number 2. She's the legal beagle involved. Wouldn't her first thing to be, you shouldn't go to that locker room. We should talk to Tony.
And I think part of the reason she may have done it, maybe part of the reason it's a problem, she's been working with Omega and the Young Bucks. And like you said, Matt Jackson's wife, Omega's assistant. She's been working with this group of people since the beginning, since before it was on TV.
Okay, well, here's another thing then. If she's the number 2 and she's in charge of legal, why didn't she lead the group in there and be the first? If Mega or any other female was the first one through the door, do you think that Punk would have started firing punches? Or would he have seen a civilian lawyer and gone, well, apparently they didn't come in here to beat my ass 6-on-1?
And again, with all of this happening, and I don't know how big the room is. I mean, CM Punk is what, sitting on a couch? How far is the couch from the door? Is it a big room? Is it a small room?
Well, see, here's another thing, and I can tell you from experience, the NBA arenas, the big buildings, a lot of people think locker room, they think you see on TV, the football team's in there, the baseball team, whatever. It's a big open area. But this was not an NBA arena, and especially if Punk had his own locker room, then there's plenty of, for concerts or for other types of show business events, these buildings have small locker rooms with a bathroom and a dressing facility, a vanity area or whatever, but it's not like you got a lot of room. So if he's in one of these private locker rooms and 4 or 5, 6 people bust in, that room's pretty full right off the bat. So how do you suddenly,
it's like the Marx Brothers,
in seconds, how do you ascertain, oh, these guys have all come in here to talk to me like men, or they've just thrown this door open and I've invited them to come in and fight, so I guess they're taking me up on it, so here we go.
Did he open the door and walk 3 steps slowly and say, look, Phil? Or did he walk, I'm serious, when you try to visualize it in your head, like did they calmly walk down the hall, or was it like, let's go tell that motherfucker what we think?
A bunch of pissed off people walking down the hall, and I've heard somebody say, oh, they knocked, and there was no, what the fuck? They threw the door open, however the fuck they did it, and started to say, hey, what the fuck? And that's about all they probably got out before matters took a turn for the worse for them.
And let's just go back a step to general etiquette. The idea that someone knocked and no one said come in, and then they're like, all right, let's just go in. When did that start?
I don't think they didn't knock. Again, nobody has seen the Mad Wrestler Walk. I've seen it for 40 years. The Mad Wrestler Walk, where they're going to fucking tell somebody something. They're not knocking on a fucking door. And if you're going down to knock, how come 6 or 7 people have to go down and talk? How about just the people that were involved? Or maybe if Mega was a lawyer instead of a stooge, she should have been the one to go down there and say, well, the other side of this thing is very upset. And when Tony finishes the media scrum, we should all sit down. She trails behind.
That's the thing I'm always saying about the fucking executives in AEW. None of them, even Mega, none of them act like actual executives. It's like kids being fucking turned loose from Tony on down. No one understands how to be fucking serious, make good decisions. If you've ever been around serious fucking executives, it's so obvious. They all, because everyone's like, oh, Mega, whatever she did, she went to Harvard, she went to Yale. I don't even fucking know. But they're like, oh, look at all these things. And then she makes dumb fucking decisions.
Well, but okay,
and she's mixed up in everything.
Wait. How many wrestling promotions has she done legal work for? Before this project started, how many professional wrestlers had she met in person? How much experience did she have dealing with any kind of professional athletes that were ready to fight each other. Does that happen in football? Probably.
Well,
but does she do any football business?
I believe so. That's how she started with the con. She starts with, I think she still does stuff with the Jaguars. She's like Tony. She splits her, unless she's fully AEW now, at least.
Okay, then does the legal department there, do they handle the football players who want to kick each other's ass, or is that the football team manager and coach and etc.? What experience? I don't care if she's goddamn Johnny Cochran or fucking Clarence Darrow. What experience in life does she have dealing with large adult male professional athletes that want to fight each other? Zero, none. She shouldn't have been involved.
One of the biggest problems in the entertainment industry is when you take contract lawyers and you give them too much power. Because they're smart people, they're talented people, they're capable people to a point. And you also have to just understand basic humanity. Whatever. This whole thing is such a mess, and it's all their own fault. That's the thing. This is 100% an AEW fault. Adam Page gets a lot of the blame for just acting like a buffoon, and he's going to own that for the rest of his career. But AEW, Tony Khan on down, the fact that it went from that point to the point where a few weeks ago they had to have a meeting that did nothing, that helped nothing, that was for show. Nothing came out of it other than Jericho got to do his little show. Nothing else came out of it, and Omega got to insult half the locker room. Or no, I guess 80% of the locker room. Now that I think about it, he had to insult. There was that, and then tensions kept growing to the point where even Dave was reporting on it. Well, and nothing was done. Nothing was done at all. Nothing was done. It was like you could see this was coming. We saw this was coming for various reasons, but it was obvious this was all going to happen if no one got in there and eased this in any way, and no one did. And no one did.
Well, let's talk about Uncle Dave and the people that he talks to for a second, because the story's coming out now. Punk is a cancer in the locker room. Punk is only out for himself. Punk is bitter. Punk is mad, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, there was an article on ESPN.com. You may have heard of ESPN. They actually still do have journalists working there. I think the Sports Illustrated website's gone off the deep end a time or two, but
you're not lying.
This was on ESPN.com from May 27th. Mark Raimondi wrote this, talking about CM Punk and his return to AEW, his return to wrestling in AEW. And the reporter was there that night last September when they did the Arthur Ashe Stadium in Flushing. I love the name of that town. Remember, Punk worked with Will Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs. And it says, Punk, one of the biggest wrestling stars of the last 2 decades, opened their discussion about how the match would be laid out with something surprising. Punk said he knew Hobbs' mother had just died about a month before, and the match would be in her honor. Hobbs told ESPN, first thing he said, don't worry about anybody else. Your mom's in the crowd. Let's put the match on for her. That made me feel so much better, so much more comfortable. Punk beat Hobbs in a match that received solid reviews from fans and critics, blah, blah, blah. But for Punk, it represented precisely why he'd returned to the ring and what he believes the industry should be all about in the first place. It talks about Punk giving back and that he felt his time in WWE was almost wasted, walking on hot coals. His mission now isn't putting on 5-star matches, winning championships, or selling out arenas, as much as it's been about those emotional moments with Hobbs and making up for lost time. Making new relationship. Darby Allin was the wrestler tasked with being CM Punk's first match. And basically, Darby Allin also says that his experience underscored the magnitude of Punk coming to AEW, because Allen's straight edge like Punk. And they mentioned that Lee Moriarty said he didn't know what being straight edge was till he became a fan of Punk, and now he follows those principles. And you've got other people in this article. Dax Harwood. He was apprehensive at first when Punk signed with AEW, because Punk made enemies in WWE. He had a reputation for being standoffish. But Harwood and Wheeler, it says, ended up hitting it off with Punk, in no small part due to their shared reverence for WWE legend Bret Hart. He's always, oh no, this is a Dustin Rhodes quote about Punk. He's always coaching up the talents when they come back or on their promos or a certain move, saying less is more sometimes. Those are very, very important things to learn as a young superstar in the wrestling world. Hobbs said he couldn't even remember the number of times Punk has pulled him into his locker room to watch one of his matches to offer guidance. Max Caster said that he's come to Punk for business advice for non-wrestling ventures. Caster added Punk made him feel included in the locker room. There's more folks here. Punk says he wanted to do for younger wrestlers in AEW what legends like Eddie Guerrero and Tracy Smothers did for him as mentors. But he's also doing it because other older wrestlers he worked with did not do the same. But the problem is that he expects people to take advice from veterans. And he expects people to want to improve. He doesn't want empty-headed nitwits like Adam Page said, I don't need to take anybody's advice. So all of these people, whether Dax and Cash or Darby or Hobbs or these other people mentioned in this, in Punk's own words himself, he wanted to come back and help. As he said at the press scrum, he's trying to run a business because Tony ain't.
Hey, look, here's the problem. There are guys who have problems with Punk going way back. There are guys who don't like him from the Midwest. There are guys that don't like him because they're on Cabana's team, which happens to be the entire Young Bucks team. So there's always people whispering and complaining about him. But we heard nothing but good things until he had to work with them. Until he had to work with the guys who had a problem with him, we didn't hear anything about CM Punk. We heard the exact opposite. I mean, we heard this stuff. And, you know, that quote you just read, and I'm going to get it wrong even though you just said it. Oh, less is more. Actually, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can get that wrong. Less is more. You could see why that advice is valuable to some, and you could see why that quote, even appearing attributed to Punk in that article, would be threatening to others, because that's the exact opposite of what they believe. They think that idea, less is more, is completely an old school idea. More is more. Just do more. More is more. And there's a lot of resentments for Punk from those guys. Because also, look, in their head, they really believe the shit that they say about, we started this company. This company was built on our backs. This company was started by and built by Tony fucking Khan.
Yeah.
With his money, his relationships, and his fucking vision.
And they were lucky that he fell for their fucking mass hysteria and decided to bring them along for the ride.
And it was all fun and games when Cody was there because they knew they could fucking out-manipulate Cody. And Cody, we talked extensively about Cody. There's a 20-hour omnibus or whatever. But Cody was flawed in a lot of ways as an executive. And it wasn't the role for him. But they needed the ego of Dusty Rhodes' son to get to where they got. And to make that happen. And then they did everything they could to ice him out of the fucking company.
Well, now, here's the thing. If Punk, the biggest star they've got, can be treated like this and subjected to the rumor campaign and have all of their darling little newsletters and websites, you know, on their side to malign this guy because he came in and was the only one so far that has produced million people fucking numbers and $1 million gates and buy rates that kept going up until they completely fell in a hole here because of all this shit going on. If they can do it to Punk, they can do it to anybody. Because one of the selling points to come to this company was, don't let Vince McMahon be in charge of your career. Remember last year, even Mick Foley, the nicest human being that ever walked the earth, got on the internet and said, I trusted Vince McMahon with my career and he made me a star. I don't know why anybody today would trust Vince McMahon with their careers. And that was the selling point. Go to AEW. Vince won't fucking destroy you. That's not the selling point anymore because Vince is gone. Triple H is in charge. Triple H is more friendly to the wrestlers when it serves his purposes, but he's certainly more sympathetic to the wrestlers' cause, especially on bad, silly gimmicks, than Vince was. And at the same point now, it's not about even putting Tony Khan in charge of your career over Vince McMahon. It's about putting Harpo McFingerbang and the Cucamonga Kids in charge of your careers instead of Vince McMahon, instead of Triple H. So who wants to do that if you are, again, an indie-rific play wrestler on the outlaw shows that the clique of the elite likes, then sure, you're fine. And you also know that you probably got no chance of going to the WWE anyway. But if you're a serious wrestler and a legitimate talent and you have a future, now who do you want to put your career in the hands of? Triple H and the most well-run mega billion-dollar wrestling promotion that's ever been on the planet, or the Hardley Boys and Twinkle Toes? Because they're going to be the determining factor in whether you get over, or whether you're allowed to get over, or whether you are the victim of a smear campaign and made miserable and run off in the locker room because you are better than they are and they know it, and they don't want that. They want everybody subservient to them, and they want all their friends that they can hold down and or put in the right spot, but they don't want serious talent to show them up. And this is what happened. Like we said, Cody just left. He said, fuck it. I got another place to go. Punk don't have that patience. And Punk don't like putting up with bullshit. And Punk doesn't want to go to the WWE because he's been there and he didn't like it. So he's like, why should I be the one to fucking leave? Fuck you, you leave if you don't like it. Now they're fucked up either way they go because he's hurt again. And that's another thing. Would he have gotten hurt if they'd have had a sensible match for him to have its pay-per-view instead of having to do an angle where they switch the belt and give the preview of the pay-per-view match away a week and a half early so they can come back and do an interview to try to put everybody in the right place so then they can have that match on pay-per-view? Then they had to go through all of that. He might not have got hurt again. Now, even if Tony does smarten up and decide that his EVPs shit the bed and acted unprofessionally, and even if he does figure out that his goddamn number 2 legal woman may be a fucking issue, he's still got no access to his biggest star for 8 months. So, this is the biggest bunch of fucking bullshit I've ever seen in my life. Even in the days of the Clique and Michaels and all of that hoo-ha in the WWF, I never saw anything like this. This is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And you know what? Even to be more fair, even though he was there, from all the reporting I've done, and my reporting has been firsthand talking to people, not just reporting on what's been reported elsewhere. Definitely some people have done some great work. But I have to say, even though he was in the room and even though he was apparently bitten, I'd like to hear more about that and what exactly happened there. But I heard that after it all went down, Kenny Omega was the only one who seemed to be a cooler head. The Jacksons were still looking to go, although I heard they were a little too obsessed with it.
They were looking to go where? To the hospital? One of them got knocked out. The other one got fucking rattled with a chair.
Well, I heard Ace Steel and Punk were still yelling at him, and they were still yelling, and everyone's in the middle, and it's just a complete mess. But Kenny was actually apparently at that point willing to be a pacifist. And as we reported, him and Punk at some point that night talked. There was an attempt to let's get everyone cool, and that did not work out. That didn't work out apparently, and that wasn't very fruitful.
Well, but at least he did try. Kenny did try to be a pacifist in all of this.
Oh, there you go. A pacifist. I've never heard that before, actually. But let's talk about a couple things around this, if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
I have here a tweet that's very interesting from the other day. Relates to something we mentioned earlier. from September 7th, 2022, which would have been Wednesday, Dynamite Night, 8:54 p.m. I've been way too fucking nice, tweeted out by Brandy Rhodes.
What was said on that TV show at 8:52 or so?
Yeah, hold on. Where was I? Just had that screen up. Let me find that again.
Well, I mean, and honestly, again, these little fucking, crumb snatchers have been running around since this thing started. We started this. It's our revolution. This all happened because of us. No, it happened because you got a billionaire that happened to fall in love with you. That's the only reason it happened. But they conveniently leave Cody out of all of that stuff because he was the misfit toy. He was the one that didn't fit the picture from the start. We've mentioned that. And now they've just decided to erase him like he didn't have anything. He probably had more to do with it than most people because he was able to have a grown-up adult conversation with other business executives that he may have come in contact with where they'd be looking at Harpo and the fucking kids and go, what the fuck is this all about?
In a lot of ways, Cody was the perfect complement for them before the company.
He was like the step parent that could keep them in line and take their ice cream away if they cried too much.
I guess that's another way of looking at it, sure. Yeah. But, the Brandy Rhodes tweet is interesting. Now, we know Cody Rhodes has an NDA, and I believe it may be a two-way NDA, so Tony Khan can't even talk about Cody. We don't know if Brandy has anything. I think her contract just expired. It is true. Look, again, we're talking about Cody, very flawed as an executive, and certainly his booking after a while went off the rails. But look at what happens with AEW. Once you're not mingling with the friends, they do their thing and you're iced out, and Cody had only so many people he could work with after a while. He certainly got distracted with other things, but he came back to a very unfriendly place. It wasn't the same. That's the reason why he left months after he returned. But we've never heard what Cody had to say, and we may never because he tries to play it nice and he's a very political guy. But Brandy, on the other hand,
what is this, open mic night, bitch?
No, you know what? Author of one of my favorite lines ever. I still laugh about it. You may have a black belt, but I'm a black bitch. It's the greatest fucking line of all time. And look, Brandy too flawed. But Brandy's wrestling push, someone should go write the history of that. It was nuts. She was a heel, she was a babyface, there were nightmares and cutting people's hair, and then they weren't. Nothing made any sense. But you could certainly say that any contribution she made have kind of been put down and diminished for a while. And we joked about it a little earlier. It's true that there are like factions. It's almost like Game of Thrones. It's like you have the Bucks camp.
Oh, boy. And by the way, we talked about Bobby Fish challenging Punk to a fight on the last program we did. And I was like, that's a shame. I always liked Bobby. I thought he's a good worker, but obviously his head's stuck with his friends from California. Now, guess who he helped and contributed money to?
I don't. Donald
Drake
Trump?
Wirtz.
Oh, come on.
He's one of the fucking ultra-religious crazies that think that there's child molesters on every corner and we got to stop the child trafficking. And he actually supported Drake Wirtz in that. So apparently, like you said, you got the Republican right-wing religious nut faction from California, the anti-Obama Bucks. I don't know if old Kenny's political or not. He just probably falls in with them.
He's Canadian.
And then you've got normal people on the other side.
Well, no, that wasn't even where I was going to go. I was just saying, here you have the Bucks camp. You have Cody and his crew. I mean, these are all the people fighting for airtime. You have Jericho and what he wants to do. By the time Punk gets there, and that's the end of Cody, Punk gets over so big. Punk's getting a lot of time on TV. It's all like a battle for fucking airtime is really what it's about. And everyone wants their thing to win out. And the Bucks can't take it that their shit is not winning out right now. The ratings for their shit isn't winning out. They have so much resentment for CM Punk, and a lot of it's unjustified, I think. I think they're lumped in with people that are mad at him for shit from like 15 years ago. The people that didn't know him then, they just met whoever he is now at this age of his life, and they're like, oh, he seems like such a nice guy. What are your problems with 20-something-year-old.
I guess what pisses me off is that, yes, these little weasels can send their version of the story out to all the news sites because they're the same journalists that sit there at the media scrums and applaud them when they come in the room. And the serious wrestlers who don't plant stories with the media because they don't talk to the media because they're just trying to do their job and they don't give a shit, their story doesn't get out. And theirs is, in this case, the true one. So it's about time that we examine this from all sides. And suddenly, somehow, over the last 2 months, CM Punk went from the returning conquering hero trying to help all the young talent to the fucking devil incarnate that's a cancer in the locker room. And it all started with that hangman promo out in public. So put 2 and 2 together and figure out what the fuck's going on in front of you. That's what I'm telling people.
Hey, everyone's looking into how did the story get out there that Punk got Cabana fired? Tony Khan is emphatic that it's not true. CM Punk is offended that anyone thinks it's true. So let's ignore that. I think the bigger issue is how did it get into the Observer that Nick Jackson saved Colt Cabana's job? Because that has nothing to do with Punk.
Well, I'm sure as soon as he talked Tony Khan into signing Colt to a contract because he's friends of all theirs, he immediately went and told all of the appropriate people what a nice guy he was to do that. And guess who was almost responsible for getting our friend fired? That's all they had to do. And people were ready to believe it because everybody knows that Punk and Cabana have been on the outs. But nobody was looking at the fact that fucking Cabana wasn't on TV for the year before Punk showed up any more than Dwarf Dongsucker was. And they let him expire. Tony was doing the same thing he does with everybody. He's not capable of telling somebody eye to eye, I paid you for 2 years, but now I'm changing talent. You're not worth it, or I love you, or whatever you need to tell him, but goodbye. He just lets the contracts expire, and that's what was obviously happening. So then the Cucamonga kids figure, well, not only can we hopefully help our buddy Colt and give him 6 figures of the company's money to do absolutely nothing, but we can make Punk look bad in the process if we spread the word that Punk was behind Colt being sent out in the cold, and everybody will believe it because they know they hate each other.
Because how otherwise would Tony ever release a talent like Colt Cabana? I mean, obviously Tony would have re-signed him, maybe given him a slight raise, if not for CM Punk saying, hey, you know that guy you want to give more money to or the same money to? Get rid of him. Tony was ready to give him what? I mean, what is the other side of the argument? What was Colt Cabana going to fucking get? A run with the title? Nothing. He means nothing to no one. And all of this shit happened because of that. CM Punk was having a fucking, in terms of being a wrestling fan, has had
heck of a run.
Having one of the great runs of modern times. The feud with MJF is a classic. It's maybe the best feud. It's the best feud in the history of AEW. It's great. He doesn't have one problem with drama until he runs into these guys. The guys that are fucking looking to get him. What the fuck is that? And I heard Dave Meltzer, he fucking bit a whole thing just destroying CM Punk. Destroying him, completely one-sided. It's incredible, the hit job that's coming out of one side about this. Well, I shouldn't say one side. One side and a certain person in the locker room who loves leaking shit because it benefits him.
Who has no sides because he plays all sides against each other. And it's the same thing they tried to do to us. Oh, yeah, he's just bitter because we won't work with him. We won't give him a job, or we won't talk to him. So they're bitter and they hate us because we're successful. No, I don't give a fuck whether you turn bled or turn blue or drop dead.
I would give a fuck if he turns bled. I'd like to see that. If he turned bled.
I don't give a fuck if you turn blue or drop dead. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to work with anybody. I'm just telling the truth, and fuck you. But they can't goddamn accept it. So they have to figure out a way that there's something wrong with everybody that doesn't like us.
And remember, I've said it. It's not just this. Before this all happened, I said they had problems with the executive vice presidents. I'm going to say this again. It's not just this.
No.
So when you're basing like, oh, it's the innocent Bucks. They like to, super kick children. How could they ever want to hurt somebody? And all their friends, and Christopher Daniels, he was in the room with them too. Hold on, Christopher Daniels, Nakazawa.
Yeah, right, because, he got suspended, and he's talent relations.
Talent relations, who's buddies with the Bucks from Southern California. Christopher Daniels, Nakazawa, Cutler, 2 Bucks, and an Omega.
And an Omega. And a partridge in a pear tree. Here's another thing. If one side was all on the up and up and the other side was all wrong, well, the side that burst into the locker room had at least 1 talent relations executive, 3 executive vice presidents, and the number 2 in command and head of the legal department, and there's still an investigation going on. Well, it seems like with all of those dignitaries in the company, you'd get the straight story, wouldn't you, from them, except if all of those dignitaries were on the fucking side that caused the problem. That's why there's an investigation going on, because there's more to the story than what that group is giving out. You would think it'd be cut and dried there. Okay, here's the lawyer. Here's a representative of talent relations. Here's 3 executive vice presidents. Oh, you mean we still don't know the true story of what went on in there? Golly. As a talent relations and or creative booking team, whatever member, I've had to witness a couple of things before just in case there was a lawsuit or whatever. And I'll tell you, remember when the skyscrapers, Spivey and Sid, when they beat that job guy up in Texas for not selling for him?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah, I saw him, and Teddy Long gave me the eye roll, like, we're going. They were headed for the guy's locker room. So I'm in the back. I'm going to try to see what happens. I know what's going to happen, but I may need to testify later on. And Spivey's in front, as you'd figure, because Sid looked great, but he ain't going to fight unless, there's some advantage. Spivey goes in there. The guy stands up. Spivey fucking punched him and dropped him and slapped him 2 or 3 times. And then, of course, Sid's so big, I'm trying to look over Sid. And I think he may have kicked him while he was down there as he was cussing him, say, you got a fucking problem? You don't want to sell? Fuck you. And then I think they spit on him and walked out. And then as the representative of the booking committee, because the guy deserved every single goddamn thing that happened to him, I then told somebody else in the locker room, I said, you better get his bags packed and get him the fuck out of here unless they decide to come back because they didn't think they got the point across. That's what happens when somebody has done something and somebody else busts in a fucking locker room. Shit takes place. If you don't want shit to take place, don't bust in the locker room.
Also,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, too, again, I'm thinking about the history of AEW, and like you and I have said and alluded to many times, we've been very well aware of the way things are going on. When Cody had problems with the Elite, you could pick whose side you want to take, right? When FTR are having problems with the Elite, and then Punk's having problems with the Elite, at what point do you realize it's the same people over and over who have a problem with anyone who's not doing their thing?
I think it's pretty obvious already. But it all boils down to what Tony Khan is willing to put up with and or whether he wants to take control of his fucking wrestling promotion. And the easiest thing to do right now would be say, okay, I don't have any more executive vice presidents. We're going to go back and start fresh, and I'm going to try to find or hire or promote from within some experienced veteran wrestling personnel to run talent relations and the booking department. And hopefully I can talk Jim Ross into helping me sit down with all the talent and determining who else is going to blow up in the near future and commit aggravated mayhem and find out how to assuage their feelings. And then I will be the promoter that makes the decisions and authorizes the expenditures and tries to regain my positive standing with the fans out there in the audience. And all these other people are going to run this fucking thing and see if we can get a coherent television show, a goddamn talent roster that doesn't look like it's mix and match day at the fucking buffet, and it's a cohesive, coherent team all pulling the same rope and going in the same direction and featuring a palatable mix of wrestling styles instead of everything all over the goddamn page like that fucking idiot Olivier wants, and get my employees under control and start trying to build for a potential contract renegotiation with our rights fees that may or may not be as easy as we thought it was going to be 2 weeks ago, because the network's hearing about all this shit too. And even if they didn't hear about the beef at the press conference and afterwards, then they would have heard about it when Tony said, well, we don't have CM Punk. Well, we don't have, well, I guess the network wouldn't care if they don't have the Bucks or Omega because they don't do any ratings. But we don't have CM Punk. Why not? Well, my executive vice presidents bum rushed him in his fucking locker room because they were pissed off of what he said at the media scrum.
What did he say at the media scrum that caused that?
Well, he said that the EVPs couldn't manage a fucking target and that he was sick and tired of having to deal with children.
Who were spreading stories about him in the press.
Yeah. So that's what the network would hear. What the fuck? That's all I'm going to say is I've been saying the same thing for the past 3.5 years. You can't do something at this level when you have everybody in charge with literally no experience at doing any of these things before and not willing to listen to people who have. This is what you get.
Yeah, everything right now is, I think, being done to placate the network because that's their biggest fear. They are terrified right now about the fucking network.
Well, and how does the network know that somebody isn't going to go into business for themselves in the ring and get in a fight and something happen and legal and blah, 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 and they'll be called in to testify or to give their thoughts on the situation under oath or blah, blah, blah. How do they know that now? It's a shit show.
It's a complete shit show. And look, it's Tony's fault. At the end of the day, this is all Tony's fault. Adam Page too, but it's all Tony's fault. Yeah. But I also feel really bad for Tony because he's in a rough position right now.
Yeah.
He's
tried, except for being oblivious to advice. He has tried his best, and I'm sure he has worked his fingers to the bone. I see the bony fingers. So yeah, you got to feel bad for him, but he should have known because we told him what was going to happen. I'm sure anybody that didn't want a job and didn't care for taking him for any money has told him, well, goddamn, that would be me, I guess. That's the sum total of those people that fit that description, but would have told him what was going to happen.
Jim, before we wrap things up, I'd like to bring up something that's actually starting to gain some buzz at the moment, and the Young Bucks are trending because of a report. It appears to be from the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Figure 4 online message board. The headline is, Report, Young Bucks sent feelers out to WWE. And this all seems to be coming from something on the F4W online message board. I'm getting this from a Wrestle Talk article. Ryan Frederick of the Wrestling Observer pointed out that the Young Bucks had their options picked up. Here's the exact quote. They didn't sign new deals. Their options were picked up. They did reach out to a talent to send feelers that they would be interested in talking about coming in when their deals are up.
And what did Steen say?
But everyone on both sides are going to do the same because you want to look for the best deal. Anyone who doesn't do so is dumb and possibly leaving money on the table. And then, I guess, explaining why the Young Bucks...
No, when you're just a fucking talent, when you're an employee, when you're just one of the worker bees, yeah, you want to see what kind of contract you can get. You want to entertain all offers. When you've made the commitment that you're an executive vice president of a company, and they've already had one leave when Cody got run off, and now these... I honestly, if they had not agreed to start AEW, from what we hear, they probably would have got a fucking WWE contract, because at the time before the company got started, they had made offers to all of them because they didn't want a billionaire getting in the wrestling business. So they wanted to try to take the talent at the start. But now, not only that, I mean, Vince McMahon, if they were willing to make an offer to the Young Bucks while Vince McMahon was in charge, that meant that they were worried about a billionaire getting in the business and they wanted to put a stop to it. Because there's no way ever in life that Vince McMahon would sign Matt and Nick Jackson seriously. Maybe like James Ellsworth or whatever, but not seriously. He wanted to stop the company. Now they've seen the company. And I've said this, I've been saying this for a couple of years. They've seen what it looks like. That's why all of a sudden they stopped those, not only stopped the high contract offers to the WWE talent to keep them, but started fucking firing people. They fired people that goddamn AEW could pick up immediately and did, because they knew what they had as competition at that point, and they weren't concerned. So now, if these two little fucking dipshits are trying to get a deal, I don't think Triple H would look at them with as much disdain as Vince, but he still don't need them, because they know now what the competition is, and those guys would never make it in the WWE. They wouldn't make it in the locker room. They wouldn't make it in the ring. And it would be ridiculous visually. So now they're trying to see if there's any interest at this point up there in them so that they can attempt to put Tony over a barrel to sign him to a new longer-term deal or whatever the case. But they ain't going to find a lot of people nibbling on that fucking worm. The time has passed. They never wanted them to begin with. They wanted Tony Khan not to have them.
Well, Jim, I have one more quote from this part here. They reached out to a talent to send feelers about coming in. I can't say they talked to anyone direct to WWE, but that would fall under tampering, and this came at the same time that the legal letters were being sent about tampering. I can't confirm they actually talked to WWE people themselves, but they talked to other WWE talent about coming in, which they can do, much like WWE talent can send feelers through AEW talent, which has happened and happens on both sides often.
Good Lord, that was a convoluted fucking way to get from point A to point B.
It's not something they wouldn't have done anyways, since their deals are coming up at the end of 2024, and you want to maximize your leverage when it comes to getting a new deal and get the companies into a bidding war.
Oh, good Lord.
It's not necessarily a sign that they're going to leave. Everyone should do it. Hey, right now they have no leverage with AEW. If Tony has a brain right now they have no leverage contractually.
They're suspended. They brought disgrace to the company and they're currently suspended. If that's leverage, then I need to look up the American Heritage Dictionary definition of leverage. And they ain't going to have any leverage with the WWE because the WWE now doesn't want... How would Triple H sell that to anybody else in the company? Yeah, I'm going to sell these two guys every time they're on the opposition program. 200,000 people tune out. What the fuck?
If the talent, I'm going to say this, even though it's not the thing. If the talent they contacted was Cody, this whole thing's a work.
No, I guarantee you they called up Steen. The only reason Steen didn't come over to join him was because they gave him a couple $1 million to stay where he was. And just the fact that you could see that the wrestling business is fucked up when Kevin Steen gets $2.5 million or whatever on a wrestling contract. But no, they just call their friends. That's all they know how to do is call their friends. But now the friends ain't going to be able to help them because they have no leverage. They have no track record of ratings. They have no track record of fucking pay-per-view buys because fortunately, they haven't been featured in any of the major pay-per-views in the main event. And they have no track record of any kind of great matches with top talent. They do the same match every time with the gymnasts that they brought with them. So they have no appeal to the WWE past. Will take them away from the billionaire so that he will have a harder time making it in the wrestling business. And now that they're not making any difference to the billionaire, I can see them going after MJF. I can see the WWE being hell of a interested in Wardlow. I can see the WWE being completely interested in Powerhouse Hobbs. I can even see, okay, for shits and giggles, let's see if we can get Omega away from him. Maybe if, either he'll listen to us and make the changes we want him to make because at least he looks like an athlete and maybe some of our guys can get something out of him, or we've taken him away from the competition and they don't have him. And, he'd have a nervous breakdown in that locker room in 3 months, but I can see them making him an offer. But for the Jacksons, I think the WWE would rather make an offer to fucking Randy and Tito than Matt and Nick.
I would actually pay to see Randy and Tito team up, even today. If Tito still has any of that afro left, because that was a mighty fine afro.
It was.
Jim, before we wrap up, I guess, if you're Tony Khan, where do you move from here? If you're going to go under the assumption CM Punk and the Bucks and Omega at a minimum are gone for a while, what does your program and your promotion look like in the next? What does it look like in the next month, 2 months, and what do you have to do immediately to change this?
Again, bring Jim Ross in, put him in charge of talent relations, see who else is mad at who and how it can be fixed. Fucking immediately, regardless of whether they ever come back or they fuck off and go away forever, do not let the executive vice presidents be executive vice presidents anymore. No wrestlers with any type of office affiliation. If they want to leave over that, help them carry their bags to the fucking car. With Punk, yes, he's been pushed and coerced and instigated and provoked and etc., but still, you got to do something because he buried Tony at the press conference saying all that in front of him. And of course, Tony buried himself by not doing anything about it when he heard it in private.
That's a great example, though. Like, he should have done something. He should have stopped him. He should have said questions only about this, whatever it may be. And while he didn't do that, I still feel awful for him when I see that. I feel terrible for the fucking guy.
But Punk's going to be out for 8 months. So that's enough punishment right there because he's punishing the company and he sure ain't going to want to sit home and recover from another surgery. And also it's punishing the company because they ain't going to have Punk for ratings or goddamn buy rates. I would get, after I put Jim Ross on the case of trying to figure out who else in the locker room is going to try to strangle each other and make sure that everybody's contracts that I want to keep for the future are not only written properly, but still have time left on them. Then I would get Jim Ross's and a few other people there, the William Regals of the world. I would get their opinion on which person or persons might be good to put together to start booking the show with absolutely no input whatsoever from Tony Khan. And they would be in charge of booking the writing the show formats and booking the talent and working with them to make a cohesive television program from week to week that would start getting people over and building issues that you'd want to see instead of bringing in people from all over the place and then you never see them again and nothing makes sense and somebody's a heel one week and a babyface the other. I like this guy's costumes. I'm going to let him go 20 minutes in the main event or whatever the fuck. And then I would see about a new legal fucking head, since Mega is obviously in over hers.
I don't think that's going to happen, but...
Well, you asked, none of this other shit's going to happen either, but you asked me what I would do. So I'm telling you, don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. I'd tell Mega to go piss up a rope, and I'd get a legitimate male attorney about 50 to 60 years old that's seen every goddamn thing in the world and is a fucking barracuda when it comes to contracts and negotiations, and I'd put them in charge of my legal department because a guy like that's probably not going to be intimidated by wrestlers or want to make friends with them. Either one is bad. Because so far, everybody I've seen in a position of power that was not in the wrestling business until Tony decided to get into it, either wants to be friends with the wrestlers or is intimidated by them. Neither one is a good thing. So, Once I'd revamped my talent relations department, and I'd revamped my booking team, and I had revamped my legal department to make sure that the fucking legal head is not with the people storming my Top Stars locker room, then I would go to the network and say, I've taken all of these steps to make sure that the shit show that happened a couple of weeks ago never happens again, especially while we're on your network. Because elsewise, what is he going to say? Well, I suspended everybody. Well, the horse left the barn before you did. What are you doing about it to make sure it doesn't happen again? That's what the network is going to say. And he's going to say, well, we're having a third-party investigation. What are you going to make sure, or what are you going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, we've suspended everybody, and I may not let them be EVPs anymore. They're still going to be around. What are you going to do to make sure it never happens again? I've got a new head of talent relations. I've got a new creative team. I've got a new head of legal. I'm stepping back. Experienced people are in charge, and we're going to have a cohesive program from here on out with everybody either getting along or out the door. That's what you tell the network. But he can't, because he's not doing any of those things. I'm done.